I'm Brandon Vaidyanathan, and this is Beauty at Work, the podcast that seeks to expand our understanding of beauty, what it is, how it works, and why it matters for the work we do. This season of the podcast is sponsored by John Templeton Foundation and Templeton Religion Trust. Hi, everyone. This is the second half of the panel discussion between Evelyn Tang, Martin Nowak, and Rob Phillips, held at the New York Encounter in February 2025. Please go check out the first part if you haven't already. Let's get started.
Let's go to the provoking theme of our panel itself, which is all that is needed is attention. This is a very strong claim. How do you feel about it? Do you agree with it? And even better, could you share an example from your own experience where attention or wonder allowed you to discover something new? And I think related to this is, Rob already said that in research and teaching, to him, they're connected. So if attention is important to you, does this shape your teaching and how we encourage our students to think and consider today? In our panels today, we have been discussing so much about the role of technology and how that impacts the way that students, don't look up as much as they did or don't speak to each other as much as we did. How do we inculcate or foster this attention? Or relatedly, what has been the role of teachers in our own lives?
I would take it in the following way, that sometimes we are blindly accepting scientific statements. And in order to really interpret them, we need attention. So I give you, I think, two examples. One example is the scientific statement that was made. Science has shown the universe exists for no reason and has no purpose. And so now you have to pay attention what is being said here, actually, to really understand whether you agree with this or not. So first of all, the statement itself assumes that the person who said it has a method to distinguish between a universe that has a purpose and a universe that doesn't have a purpose, and has a method to distinguish between a universe that exists for a reason and a universe that exists for no reason. And science somehow has, and this is not true if you think about it. So science does precisely not show that. So this is a philosophical statement, if you want to say this, but science doesn't do this. Something else which I find very interesting, sometimes there was a strong insistence that evolution is taught in the following way. Evolution is an unguided process. So when you talk about evolution, you have to say it's an unguided process. So if I hear this sentence, I have to ask, unguided by what? So you are already an atheist, so why do you say it's an unguided process? Do you also say gravity is an unguided process? So I think we need attention when we want to interpret science properly to give us a broader worldview and to tell us who we are.
Maybe I'll tell a story that happened a couple of months ago on a United flight. I'm excited. I already got my flight for tomorrow. I know my seat. I have a right-hand window seat on a 787. And I was flying back from Europe. And for a great reason, the captain, a woman on United, she came back to greet all the people in business class. And I said, I'm really excited about Greenland today. And you all might not believe this, but I'm telling you the truth. In the middle of the flight, the captain came back to wake me up because she said it was one of the greatest days she's ever seen. And the reason I bring this up is I'm always very puzzled. I find your question in a way puzzling, which is I don't understand how people don't pay attention. Just to give you an example, why are all the windows closed when you're flying over Greenland? But seriously, like mine's open. And I was sitting there and a person next to me called the flight attendant and said, I could hear her. She said, could you tell that guy that I'm watching a movie and he's got the window open? I said, and she rotated by 180 degrees and told me that. And I said, could you tell her that I'm flying in an aluminum tube at roughly the speed of sound, that Greenland is right down there? And if you asked somebody 300 years ago, would you like to see Greenland from the sky? They'd probably say yes. So that's what I tried out. Wow, thank you. Okay, well, so I don't know. I mean, honestly, I feel really out of place because kids notice things. And I just feel like maybe here's the way I would say it is I think that we don't take ourselves seriously. That's my honest answer to you about the question of attention, which is if you have a thought, like in science, if you have a thought and you take it seriously, you just gave yourself maybe 5 years work, right? So if you take it seriously, you've got to follow it. You can't just say like that. You have to follow it. So that's a formal way to have attention, I guess. So I trust that process a ton. not only in science, but in life. Like if I pay attention, I feel it pays off. Anyway, that's very personal. It's subjective. It's not anything anyone else might share, but that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that the reason why this panel here exists and we're putting this idea of attention in science together is precisely because I think in science, the way in which we pay attention is particularly deep. It can go, it's particularly focused. I'm going to read a quote by Simone Weil where she wrote that attention consists of suspending our thoughts, leaving it detached, empty, and ready to be penetrated by the objects. It means holding in our minds, within reach of these thoughts, but on a lower level and not in contact with it, the diverse knowledge we have acquired, which we are forced to make use of. So it's a very complex process where you pay attention to something, but you also relate it with lots of other things. We see Greenland, but we also think about, wow, I'm seeing it from a distance. Or I think of a statement and I'm not just taking the statement at face value, but I'm interrogating it with the different methods that I have of how to understand a statement. And it's this particular focus that I think that, we'd love to hear you guys speak to about what that journey has been that's very particular and specific. And so also about your experiences and how this might shape your teaching. Rob, you already mentioned...
Can I comment on what you just said, though?
Go ahead.
So an experiment is actually a way of paying attention. So check this out. So, I just dropped something, and all of us have experienced that at one time or another. But Galileo, he spent years on that. He had to figure out how to slow down time by using the inclined plane. There's many Italians here, and I love that. So I just led a tour, actually, of Italy to go to Galileo's home in Florence, and we went to do Enrico Fermi. So anyway, an experiment, I don't know if you've thought of it that way, but an experiment is a way of paying attention. That's what an experiment is. It's a formalization of attention, right? Do you buy that?
Yeah. It's a repeated, constant probing of what's going on. Fantastic. And we'd also love to hear how this has, in your teaching. Martin, I think you've been, you told us about how your ideas on mathematics are perhaps, you tell your students about what you think about mathematics, and this is challenging because it's not conventional. So we'd love to hear, and Rob, you told us about how you bring your students to the Galapagos. So we'd love to hear about how also your ideas about paying attention, about the material and immaterial are brought into your teaching, or conversely, what has been the role of teachers in your lives?
So the role of teachers in the life of a scientist is profound. I was very, very fortunate that my PhD advisor, Carl Sigmund in Vienna, stayed my lifelong friend. And the first thing that I always do when I go back to Vienna is I walk with him in the forest and we have the conversations, the same kind of conversations we had when I was his PhD student. We've continued to work for many, many years. And my mentor in Oxford was Robert May. He was president of the Royal Society later. But my mentor in this science religion field, Sarah Coakley, she is an ordained priest in the Church of England, but she always taught me Catholic philosophy, I'm glad to say. So this is what I learned from her. But here is another element that I think some of the greatest moments where I learned something was from my own students, from the students in class, from the PhD students, from the postdocs, when they gave me answers and surprising insights that really moved me. So I think as a scientist, you are always a learner. And even if you teach a class, you are actually the learner and you benefit greatly from the questions of the students and from the interactions with the students.
Yeah, so first of all, in terms of shaping teaching, I guess I just feel like the constant emphasis on performance metrics really deprives us of what I think of. This is kind of obnoxious, but I think there's a Hippocratic oath for teaching, which is you shouldn't kill souls. I don't mean that in the the usual way, but like Evelyn and I had an amazing experience, which was we went up to the 100-inch telescope on Mount Wilson. And any of you that fly to LA, if you get a right-hand window seat, you will be able to see where the fires burn, but on the top, you'll be able to see the 100-inch telescope where Edwin Hubble discovered the expanding universe. And I've taken 200 students and faculty members. You and I went there together. It's kind of mind-blowing to do that. So I guess what I would say about how does paying attention focus my own teaching, I don't really care about teaching Fourier transforms and PDEs and all these formal things. I care about, can people start sentences with the two words I wonder. As far as teachers, for me in particular, I feel that we failed each other. So I left high school after 11th grade. I really resented my high school experience, which is where I came to my view on the Hippocratic Oath of teaching. And so I think, at least for my teens and something, my greatest teachers were weird people in books like Euclid and Archimedes and things like that. But I agree with Martin. You learn from your students. That's the beauty of this enterprise of science. We're all essentially equally ignorant. The thing about the way I would represent grad school, and I don't know if this is true in the fields that we've heard people from today, but in science, it's a kind of learning about the unknown. You're not learning about the known. You're learning about the unknown, and nobody knows the answer. If somebody knows the answer, you're not working on the right problem.
That's exactly right. So this is the very beautiful experience of a scientist, is that you always stand before the unknown.
That's right.
And in some sense, what is known is almost boring.
Yes.
And so you don't even want to look too much at what is known. You are constantly, every day, every morning you get up, you stand before the unknown. And the unknown is always in front of you. And science will never be done. And mathematics will never be done.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of it. And you have to ask yourself, why is this? Why will mathematics never be done? Why will science be never be done? And the priest gave me the answer. Because God is an infinite being. And we will never understand an infinite being.
So you both have extremely interesting stories and life paths and also interests. And we'd love to hear how all of this has made you the scientists and mathematicians that you are. So besides reading scientific books and articles, do you read other things or spend time with friends and family? Basically, I'm curious about what helps you in your research and if there is a relation with your personal pursuits.
You want to go first?
You go first.
Okay. Sure. So first of all, I really feel very strongly about the subject of this particular session, which is that one has to formalize paying attention. That asking a question, taking it seriously, and then trying to figure out how am I going to actually make falsifiable progress on it. There's a lot of hot air, I guess I would say. I think reading, I love the video at the beginning because I think that it's true that we don't respect somehow the past. And I really can't tell you how much I see that in 18-year-olds. They don't know that much about the history of science or the history of things more generally. And so it's pretty awesome to be able to read, I don't know, whatever, Moby Dick, but also the latest romance novel. I think it's all great. And so you were asking about friends and family. I don't really acknowledge, I just feel like I'm a spoiled person that gets paid to goof around. So it's not as though...
Well, Rob, regarding, friends and family, I suppose we met because you were bringing together a group of people that you want to build community with. So clearly, friends and community is important to you.
For sure.
And, Martin, I met several of your collaborators, I told you, before I even met you. So I know also that you have a strong network of collaborators whom you're very close. And so clearly this is something that's also important in your journeys. And that's something that, I think we would be...
Yeah, I mean, actually, maybe this is interesting. Some people have a philosophy like they will go out into the world to find that collaborator, that scientist that will be most helpful for their enterprise. And I kind of don't share that, because if that person's not fun to interact with, then I'm not going to go hang out with them. So what can I tell you?
Yes, I also completely agree that I see science very much as a collaborative enterprise, and you absolutely need to work together with people who are your friends.
Yeah.
So this is where the friends come from. For me, great moments of inspiration were when I first came to university, and in physics class, the professor performed an experiment in front of the class, and then he says, in order to understand the experiment, we have to calculate. So this was the first time that I realized mathematics was not just there to give homeworks to high school kids,
right,
but is actually there to understand something. And that fascination then drove me to become, I wanted to become a theoretician, somebody who uses mathematics to describe first chemistry and then biology. And in this endeavor between science and religion, there were many moments when I came to Harvard. I first met Sarah Coakley, and she was a professor in the Divinity School. And I realized from her, I could learn how to speak what I want to say about science and God. Because at that time, I wasn't able to do that.
That's cool.
Then came a moment when I was deeply fascinated, and I still am, by the Bhagavad Gita, So the Bhagavad Gita, Gandhi calls it the gospel of selflessness. And in the Bhagavad Gita, we are asked to think of the sufferings of others as our own, to see the same God in every other person. The Bhagavad Gita is a call for selfless action. You are asked to act in the world selflessly, but you shouldn't be attached to the outcomes of the action. So the Bhagavad Gita was a huge spiritual inspiration for me, and it is mentioned in Beyond. After that, I read the Katha Upanishad, and the Katha Upanishad describes the soul as fusing with God. Then I asked Sarah Coakley again, do we have the same in Christianity? And she says, it is not really the standard vision, but I should read Teresa of Avila. And so then I read Teresa of Avila, The Interior Castle, and I was deeply moved. And for the first time, I got a glimpse of what it takes to actually love your enemies and how she was able to do that. Something has to happen in your life if you want to love your enemies. Then I was done with Teresa of Lisieux, Teresa of Avila, and I said, all my life I knew there is this big Teresa and the little Teresa. And I have never ever bothered to read anything about the little Teresa. Now I want to find out about the little Teresa. And then I started to read, and I was captivated and mesmerized beyond description, and my life changed. And then I had this feeling she was always present in my life, but I was not worthy yet to know her directly. And at that moment, the revelation came. She revealed herself to me as she has to hundreds of thousands of other people before me, because this is really her role. She said, my life begins after my death. I will not just be in heaven. I will tirelessly work to bring souls to God.
Right, that was her mission, in a sense. That's beautiful. I am so struck by how the both of you have been reiterating this idea that there is this mystery that even the more we know, the more we don't know, or that there's so much that you would say we don't know and that we have to ask, and that there's always this infinite that's continuing. You know, and Einstein said as well that the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true arts and science. So this seems to be a theme, something that is urging us on this, that's making us look. And so, you know, I'm curious, does being in front of nature and its laws that you find, that you discover, does it evoke more profound existential questions in you? And where are these questions leading you?
Yeah. I actually should have said when I was showing the video of the sea lion that I think it's apocryphal, because I tried to trace this quote unquote remark from Einstein where he said you have two options. You can either treat everything as mysterious or nothing. And I really just find that the former is way better in every regard. You know, it's more useful. It's more it makes you happier, I think, to view something as simple as a view out an airplane over Greenland, or just encountering all of you on the stage as, you know, kind of mysterious. Of course, for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but of course it elicits other questions. And I very much appreciate what Martin was saying about mathematics, because that's been one of the great things in my life, is the realization that by pure thought, I could write down an equation that could tell me how old the Galapagos are. You know, like I know that there's such equation. I didn't look it up in any book. I just figured out what it was and wrote it down, and I found out, yeah, that works. But at the same time, as we heard this morning and some of the other talks, that may not be helpful when faced with the very human question, you know, like how to be a parent. You know, let's keep it simple. Anybody that's a parent in the room, I imagine, has understood that feeling. You know, you think you have some concept of what it means to be a parent, and then you get a curveball. And most of us are not good at hitting curveballs, is what I've seen. Yeah, it elicits all sorts of questions. And since there's so many Italians here, I've already said this to a few of you. There's an Italian author, Dino Buzzati. I'm not sure I pronounced his name correctly. And my all-time favorite short story, all-time, is by him. And I translated it from French to English for my dad, because it didn't exist in English while he was in the process of dying from cancer. And it's not something I would normally be attached to. It's very much relevant to all of you in the sense that if you have a background of Catholicism, it will mean the world to you, but it's called humility. And I feel like that's part of this issue about the mystery. Like, it's very easy to march around in this world acting like you've got the bull by the horns, but in science nor in life, in my opinion, do any of us have the bull by the horns. There's just always the next thing, the next mystery, the next thing you don't know. And so I think that really calls for humility.
Yeah, that life is fall to our knees in some sense and say, "Well, what's this?"
Yeah, and I don't understand it. Yeah, that's my take, for what it's worth.
Yeah, it's very difficult to add. This is already such a complete description, but I think one quote attributed to Einstein is that Einstein talks that his success was based on the fact that he never stopped asking the questions that only a child would ask.
No.
Coming back to that, something else attributed to him, which I like even more, is actually, if I could explain what I was doing, it wouldn't be research. And this sentence I always want to use in my grant writing when I have a grant.
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
And I think it's right that nature is immensely beautiful, and as a scientist, you find nature mysterious, and you ask yourself certain questions, and you want to give explanations. So here's another anecdote from the history of science. Johannes Kepler is very much associated with the 3 laws of Kepler.
Yeah.
But these 3 laws of Kepler, they were basically discovered by Newton. Newton went through all of Kepler's works and then found these 3 things out there and realized this is what he can explain with his equation. Kepler himself never considered this his main contributions at all. So the first Kepler law is that the planets go on ellipses. He considered an embarrassment. This was not a discovery. It cannot really be true because it wasn't beautiful enough.
Yeah.
And for the second law, he derived an approximation, which he then later proved to be false. Then he forgot about that, and all his life he used the false approximation for the second law. The third law was hidden in a book of 800 pages on the harmony of the spheres.
Yeah.
So why did Kepler not pay attention to these first 3 Kepler laws? Because when he was 25 years old, he had already discovered the most beautiful thing that is out there. He had discovered why there are 6 planets and why they have the relative distance from each other.
Yeah.
This needed to be explained at that time. So at that time, the solar system had 6 planets, and they had a certain distance. The distance could be measured. And Kepler understood why. And this is how he did it. He at first used 2-dimensional models of mathematics to have polygons and circles.
Yeah.
So like a triangle, and then a circle around it, then maybe a square and a circle around it, and he tried to fit it in some sense. And whatever he did, it didn't work. And then he realized, I'm stupid. The universe is not 2-dimensional, it's 3-dimensional. So I will do the same thing in 3 dimensions. So in 3 dimensions, what are my solids, the Platonic solids? So there are only 5 Platonic solids in 3 dimensions. So he has 5 Platonic solids, 6 spheres, inside and outside. He arranges them a little bit and has the right distances. At that moment, he realizes this is how God created the solar system. And he persuaded the emperor to build that model in silver. So for him, that was the biggest contribution. But not quite right, but very beautiful.
Yeah. But I think I love that, and I agree with it. And we can just keep going. Like Lamarck had his ideas about evolution and so on. And I think that there's something for all of us to learn. First of all, like philosophically about humility. It also has to do with how hard it is to figure stuff out, and it takes hundreds of years. So I don't know. I personally find when I'm walking around and I run into all the answer havers, I'm just kind of like, well, maybe you've got the Platonic solids arranged to give me the distances of the planets.
So unfortunately, our time is coming to a close. I would like to remind all of you that at 7 p.m., so right after this event, Martin will be available to sign his new books, Beyond and Within, at the Human Adventure book table right outside the auditorium. And I want to give one important announcement before closing this event. This encounter is a little big miracle in the heart of New York City. It is a place for all those who seek belonging. So we invite you to give generously at our donation table outside this auditorium or in a couple of clicks at the newyorkencounter.org/donate. And now please please join me in thanking our speakers. And again,
All right, folks, that's a wrap for this episode. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with someone who would find it of interest. Also, please subscribe and leave us a review if you haven't already. Thanks, and see you next time.